Welcome to our 5th webinar on the journey to NAISEF, and we've got our STEM coaches on and our trusty science fair director, Renee Howell, and she's going to talk to us about conducting research. Thank you, Renee. Take it away.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us for webinar number 5. Hard to believe we're already on our 5th one. So we're focusing on conducting research today. So I'll talk you through the process of how to do background research, what kind of format you're going to want to use, and then special cases as well. So our step 1 is to pick a topic, which we discussed in our last webinar, which was webinar 3. So if you are interested in looking at that, if you happen to miss it, I have it linked on the slide deck here, which I will be posting to our educator Google Classroom later. Your step 2 is to develop a background research plan. So this is really a way for your students to generate ideas, to learn more information about their specific topic that they're interested in. So you're going to want to identify keywords for the science fair project. This is going to vary from student to student, but this is going to also help them when they are trying to find resources online. One of the key things about being able to do research is knowing how to find reputable sources. So we're going to want to do that by helping our students identify keywords for their project. And then you're going to create a table of questions. You're going to basically center all of these questions around what, when, where, how, why, and which, and then you're going to plug in your specific keywords. I'll show you a table on the next slide about what a table of questions will look like. And I also added one to our educator Google Classroom. You're also going to want to identify any mathematical formulas or equations that might be needed to help you describe the results that your students get out of their experiments. So if your student is really interested in physics, this is probably going to be a little bit more intensive than a student that's interested in, say, biology. And then you want your students to search for the history of similar experiments. However, you also want to make sure that they are picking something that isn't exactly the same as somebody else's. If they're doing exactly the same thing as somebody else, then that's considered a demonstration. They're just showcasing the fact that this experiment still works. So you can find one that's really similar to what your student wants to do and then tweak it a little bit to make your students a little bit more unique so it can be its own project. This is an example of one of those question charts. So you've got the question word, why, how, who, what, when, where, and then you've got fill in your keywords. So this specific example is, does drinking milk help with this, help decrease spiciness more than water or Pepsi? So to give you some context as to the possible research questions there on the left or right hand side. You're also going to want to sort these for relevance. Some of these are going to give you like really nonsensical questions or questions that your students can't research. So you're obviously going to want to filter those out. So an example of an irrelevant question is, why does spiciness happen? You're not researching the why of it, you're more researching the how of it. So some of these questions may come back and you're like, that's probably not where we want to go with this. And it is okay to discard some of those questions. Again, we are just at this point getting your students really thinking about the process. And this also helps them identify where they want to specify their project. So again, we're starting really broad with what topic they want, and then using this why, how, who, what, when, where can help narrow it down to a specific research question for your students. All right, so you've got your background research, then you want to integrate that into your general research plan. A research plan is something that you are going to submit as a form. This is going to be in form 1A for AISEF. And things that your research plan should always include is your rationale for the research. Why are they doing it? We also want a brief overview of the background information. So you did the background research in the previous step. You want to integrate that here and make sure that it showcases the way that it supports the research problem. Another key thing is if there are any pertinent social impacts, and specifically for NAISEF, if there are any cultural aspects that your students are going to be exploring in their project, this is a really great place to put that. You're also going to want to, of course, state your hypothesis, your research question, and your expected outcomes. As usual, we're following the scientific method here. And then you will have your research methods and conclusions at the end of the research plan. One thing I'm going to go on and on about is procedures. You want to make sure your students are detailing every step in their experimental process. Even if it doesn't work, we want to know about that. We want to know about the iterations. We want to know how your students acclimated to changes and to unexpected outcomes. That is really important. So make sure that your students are collecting that data, are saving that data so that they can talk about it when they present. We also want to talk about during procedures, the data collection method. So if they were testing like rainwater on their reservation and determining whether or not it's drinkable, we want to talk about like specific kits that were used to test it, which minerals you were testing, that sort of thing. And again, this should all be original research at this point. The background information should be cited before this, and this should be all stuff that they've collected themselves. And risk and safety, we want to know, are there any potential risks? And if so, you need to identify those. So I'm going to continue talking about these guys, which are your potential pre-approval requirements, anything involving invertebrates, anything involving microbes, anything involving potential biohazards, human studies, those kind of things. Those would be considered potential risks, and you're going to want to cite those. Additionally, you're going to want to get pre-approval before you do any experimentation with those specifics. Research methods and conclusions, continued, and data analysis. So your students told us all about their data before. This is where you would have your graphs. This is where you would have charts. Data analysis is describing how your students interpret these results. So they basically tell us what the answer to their research question is at this point and how the data supports the conclusion that they came to. So the background research plan is so that your students create their bibliography. The AISEF folks are definitely going to want to see this, and they're going to want to see a minimum of 5 citations from reputable sources. Again, Wiki is not considered a reputable source, so please make sure that your students are not including that in their search. It can be a great jumping off point, but again, we don't want that in the final bibliography. Again, if you're using vertebrate animals, there are special requirements. So if your student is using, say, mice, then they would need to have a citation for animal care, for example, in their bibliography. Our ethics, any study done on human subjects requires pre-approval by the NAISEF Scientific Review Committee before students begin their experimentation. So please make sure that you are doing this well before our deadline. The deadline is January 18th to submit for pre-approval. However, that's going to be really late in terms of how long your students have to experiment before the fair actually happens. So we do want to make sure that if your student is even vaguely interested in anything with human studies or vertebrate animals or microbes, that they are communicating that with us, just so that they have plenty of time to run their experiment with proper approval. We really don't want students to put in the work and then find out that they submitted after this deadline and won't be able to compete because of the ethics requirements that we have. There's also a full PowerPoint that I also am going to be adding to our Google Classroom that goes over like special cases in detail in terms of like what you need to cite, how to do human studies in a way that is considered ethical. And human studies doesn't have to mean that you're like genetically experimenting on humans. This is if you ask people questions to get answers from them, that is considered a human study. If you send out like a Google form and folks fill it out and send it back, that is a human study, and we need to make sure that we are following the proper protocols for that. And again, all special cases, which are these guys: hazardous chemicals, vertebrate experimentation, human studies, microbes, or biohazards. This also includes genetic manipulation. So if you're doing CRISPR with your kiddos, that'll count here as well. Will require that pre-approval by the January 18th deadline.